October 20th, 2021, Executive Council, Council Chamber, State House, Boston, Mass. Dear Councilors, I'm pleased to nominate the following person to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court. I submit the nomination for the advice and consent of the Governor's Council, Executive Council, pardon me. Pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the nominee is Brian K. Walsh of Walpole, Massachusetts, to the position of Chief Justice of the District Court, which position was authorized by Chapter 206 of the Acts of 1988. When closing the nominee's resume for your convenience, sincerely, Charles D. Baker, Governor. So our official name is the Executive Council. Did you know that?
I did not.
Okay, that's our name. But it's become known colloquially as the Governor's Council. But in the Constitution, it's the Executive Council. Okay?
Good one. Excuse me, I have to change for my back.
Did you ask?
Oh, I thought I did last week.
No, you didn't, but you can use my chair, yeah. I bought that chair, that's the only reason I said.
Yeah.
New chair at my desk this morning too.
Oh, somebody's playing musical chairs.
I know.
Okay, so the way it works is we're going to have your witnesses testify, and that's the first order of business. So let me introduce the councilors, Councilor Kennedy, Councilor DePaulo, Councilor Devaney, and myself. Others are coming, they're stuck in traffic, but they said go ahead. So your first witness.
Mr. Chairman, Roberta Fitzpatrick.
Good morning, councilors.
Good morning.
My name is Roberta Fitzpatrick, and it is genuinely my privilege and my honor to testify before you today.
Is that an Irish name?
It is.
Really?
How could you tell? I have had the pleasure of knowing Brian Walsh and actually practicing law with Brian Walsh for approximately 20 years. We started practicing together in the 1990s, and that was at Gallagher and Gallagher, and then after that we practiced together at Mintz-Levin. And then most recently, for the last, I think it's already been over 15 years, as in-house counsel at Arbella Insurance Group. I have known Brian during this time to, I would say the trait that stands out the most to me is his ability to diffuse a situation. He communicates calmly, professionally, respectfully. He has a great sense of fairness. He has had quite a presence in the district court as a litigator. He's his way around the courtroom. It's very clear to him that it's essentially a community court. And he's seen quite a bit, of course, in the courthouse. I know he has great respect and compassion, not only for the litigants, but for the staff, for the practitioners, and of course for the justices as well. I would say it's really, and I was thinking a lot about it because he had asked me to testify on his behalf today. And there are so many traits that I could talk about. It's obviously his legal acumen and the way that he applies the law to the facts. Really causes all of our colleagues within our office, we're an in-house office, a captive law firm inside of a larger organization. So we certainly go to him for advice and direction, as do our internal clients in the Arbella organization. And I have had Arbella insureds call me and tell me what a great job Brian has done for them. His analysis that I think will bring so much to the bench, along obviously with his compassion and his preparation. There was a recent example, and I was trying to think of an example because there were quite a few, but there was a case, and I won't bore you with the details, but it was a recent Supreme Court case called Duell versus Foster, and it was a very complicated case about why the court is shifting its view of an instruction that deals with substantial contributing cause. Now it looks to but-for causation. I read that opinion at least 3 times. It was a very lengthy opinion. And I finally got up and I walked into Brian's office and I said, Brian, I need your big brain on this. I need you to dumb it down for all of us. I need you to do an analysis and present it to our group. And he did a fabulous job. Then most recently, we actually had a request for an opinion come in. And right away, I went to open the case, get the matter started, sit down and explain it to Brian. I had emailed him the night before. He had already done the analysis and spoken with the client and told him why it's a straight joint tort case. So I can't say enough about his analysis. As a person, in his personal life, he served 2 terms on a local school committee. And I think that speaks volumes. He was reelected to the local school committee and he served as chair. And I think that that's an extremely challenging position. The fact that he was reelected, I think, speaks volume about his ability to diffuse a situation, reach consensus, find solutions. And these are the kinds of skills I'm quite confident he's going to bring to the bench. He's open-minded, he can see both sides of a situation. He gives a balanced, insightful view of circumstances. We go to him, I mean, he sits at round tables and, you know, our clients will ask him, can you consider this? What do you think is likely to happen? Do you think liability is clear? Should we be being off or should we be defending this case? Should we be resolving this case? And people go to him for counsel. He's also been a mentor to the younger associate in our office and to paralegals and to law clerks over the years. I would say that he can achieve balance within the bounds of fairness and the law. And he's a seasoned district court practitioner. He will have the courage to do what's right, even if it's unpopular. So in closing, I would say it's really not just his legal acumen, it's his integrity and it's his sense of fairness. It's his appreciation that people do make mistakes. He will try and find solutions, again, within the bounds of the law. And, you know, we've been fortunate that we have a leader in our organization that is committed to helping to support social justice initiatives, and we do a lot of diversity and inclusion training and discussions. I always ask Brian to be a lead part of those conversations, and I am confident he will not be influenced in any way by race, by gender. He'll have compassion for people with mental health issues. All of these reasons, I support him without hesitation, and I think he will be a very valuable member of the bench. So
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Judge Farrell, please.
Can I just ask a question? So how many years have you known Melanie?
20 years.
20 years. So, you know, you've seen his demeanor and his temperament. What has impressed you the most with one case you can? Sure.
It's a very large case that he handled. It had to do with, it was really an unfortunate situation where there was a funeral parlor that had missed the again, he was able to use it. He was able to help families together.
Well, your testimony means a lot to me, 20 years knowing this nominee. I've said it before, we've had people sitting in that chair and I said, well, how long have you known this person? Oh, I saw him once in court. That doesn't do it for me. 20 years, that's great. Thank you for coming, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Honorable Judge Farrell,
Mr. Chairman,
I heard that you were actually a judge for many, many years, but we just confirmed you recently. Is that true?
I only did the work that was needed to be done. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this council, for the extreme honor of allowing me to appear before this council again and address you again. You make me feel most welcome, and I appreciate the awesomeness of this room. I have, for the record, my name is William G. Farrell. I have the honor of having been appointed by this council to serve as an associate justice in the district court, and thank you again for that wonderful opportunity. It has been exciting and rewarding, and I'm so impressed by how supported I've been by the Chief Justice as well as my fellow members. They've only been giving me great advice and great encouragement. So the people that you have been appointing have just been terrific to me, and thank you for that opportunity. I've known my friend Brian Walsh for over 20 years, actually, from when he first began his practice as an assistant district attorney in Suffolk County. He's another product of the outstanding office of Ralph Martin. And I've known him from my experience as a magistrate and an assistant clerk in the Dorchester and the Somerville courts. And I am so impressed by the quality of his character and his professionalism. He will be a tremendous judge. He's a humble and a devoted family man. Like me, Brian grew up in Boston, poor, but our loving parents never allowed us to realize that. He went to Boston Public Schools, and he tells me one of the proudest moments of his life was when he came home from Boston Latin Academy and was able to tell his father that he had earned a scholarship to BU. And he was proud because then his parents wouldn't have to worry about a tuition for him. He and his wife, attorneys Brian and Ann Walsh, have also raised a fabulous family of achievers. Their 5 children are all excellent students who are as accomplished on the athletic fields and in community services they are in the classroom. I wish that you could have met them all. They're beautiful, wonderful, intelligent kids. Celia is a senior at Georgetown. Jenna is a sophomore with my Madeline at Holy Cross. I wore the Holy Cross tie for them. I couldn't wear the BU tie. I'm from BC and it's hot enough, but I'll do this for our children. Nolan is a senior at the Roxbury Latin School, and Riley is a junior at Notre Dame Academy, and probably the best athlete of them all is Liam. He's in the 5th grade in Walpole, and thank you, Liam, for coming to our baseball game. The night of my interview with you, I coached a game in Norwood. Brian showed up with Liam to be supportive of us. He's a tremendous family man, and he has spent many, many miles traveling to out-of-state tournaments with his children, as well as many, many hours in local community service projects with them. Brian and Ann Walsh lead by example. We spoke about the importance of having a judge that can be as comfortable with criminal matters as they are with the myriad of civil case types. And personally, I've seen Brian, a prosecutor, as well as in private practice. And I can tell you that he is skillful as both and professional. And he will step right in and be an asset to the court and to the public that we serve in all case types. You know, just a week ago, I had a motion to suppress on a Rule 803 issue that I hadn't seen in a long time. I reached for my Judge Grasso and McAvoy book. It brought me right back, and I was able to make a decision right from the bench. And Brian will be the same type of a judge. The one thing that has always stood out to me, though, about Brian and his practice is that he would ask me things like, well, what's the right thing to do? Or he would point out, that's the right thing to do. I have to tell you that he always advocated for the victim or for his client, but he was always striving to do what was right. And that isn't something that lawyers talk about much. And I got to hear that from him, and it's very impressive to me. I am positive that that's the type of attitude that will serve him well in his position as a judge. And finally, I know your concerns. I submit to you that you will find Brian Walsh to be a person that understands the concerns of this council, who wants to appoint judges who are empathetic, who will interpret the law, who understand that cages are not a modality for treating people who suffer from a mental illness or a substance abuse disorder or an alcohol dependence disorder. He knows that there is special consideration that has to be given to understand the needs of developing young people who come before our court. He knows what it's like to be a lawyer in practice, trying to run the business of a law practice. He understands the importance of recognizing bias and treating all persons with respect in his effort to do what is right. Therefore, I hope that you will look favorably upon this nomination of the governor and lieutenant governor. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good to see you, Judge. So far, you're doing a great job.
Thank you for noting that, and I appreciate how supportive everybody in the courts has been to me. When I came before you before, I said, I don't come before you alone. I come before you carried by many people. That continues in my new job, and I'm thankful to Chief Justice Stawley and all the judges that have been so supportive, the folks in the clerk's office, the probation department, the court officers, the bar advocates and prosecutors. Everybody has been just so invaluable to me, and there's great work being done by the victim witness advocates behind the scenes that I really appreciate.
Councilor Devaney.
Thank you.
Oh, nice to see you. I can't stop smiling because this is one of my best votes I ever took in 21 years.
I'm still the favorite though
They love it.
I know they liked him, but I'm still the favorite.
Well, you're on the list, the Hall of Fame.
Oh, okay. As long as
Your testimony means a lot because it's heartfelt. You know him personally, you know him professionally. So knowing him and seeing him as an attorney, what do you think the greatest attribute he brings as a judge to the court?
Well, he talked a lot about being a dad and being a coach, and those attributes that you learn: patience, understanding, leadership. I think that he brings those because of the family that reared him and the family man that he has become because of the support of his wife and, quite frankly, the tests of those 5 children.
Yeah. Well, I share with you, I regret that his children weren't allowed to come. They're all grown, except the 5th grader, and he would have been great to share this day with him. It's important to me to have someone that has experience. And when you have someone 40 years old, you know what they lack too besides experience? And compassion, working in the community. He certainly has all that. As a coach and all of the years that he has, devoted to that. And in public service too, in the school committee. You're not always popular with everybody when you're a school committee person, that's for sure. So, all of that, it was important to me, but I'm glad you brought that up because I think, family and being involved in the community is important besides all his qualifications. So I can't thank you enough to come.
Thank
It's
you.
so good to see you. My pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Sure, Mr. Chairman.
I noticed the nominee hasn't done criminal work in quite a while. He's a civil fellow. And we need civil fellows on the district court, but he's gonna do a lot of criminal. And you're gonna be available if he needs something to call you and you can help him through anything that he might need.
Not only I, but any of my colleagues have done nothing except given me their cell phone numbers, their time, their advice, constantly asking, how can I help you? There will be outstanding support. And as I mentioned in my remarks, even I, who I'm doing criminal and civil throughout my experience, I was given a motion to suppress issue that I really hadn't seen. It's a spontaneous utterance. I hadn't seen it in a while, but I was able to pick up the Grasso and the McAvoy book, and it brought me right back. And that's going to be the same for Attorney Brian Walsh, because even though he may be practicing civilly, he's in the district courts. He's been in the district courts with me. There are motions to suppress. There are bench trials. There are evidentiary motions that are occurring. So he's going to pick it up quite quickly, and the support for him in the district court is tremendous. So I have every confidence, and I want you to know that you should have confidence that he is going to be able to pick right back up where he was without any hesitation.
You're gonna get him a copy of McAvoy's book.
I took mine and I'm not giving it back, so I'll direct him how he can get that.
I'll Judge McAvoy and see if she has a copy she can send.
Well, I'll leave that to others. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Judge, for coming in. I appreciate your testimony. It means a lot to all of us, I'm sure.
I hope you'll allow me to remain during the rest of the hearing.
Stay as long as you wish.
look at the vacation day to make sure I could be here for it.
Thank you.
You will enjoy Attorney Walsh. Thank you again.
Thank you. That concludes the witnesses for. Anybody here against the nomination? Anybody here wants to speak against the nomination? Hearing none. Mr. Walsh,
Thank you very much,
how
Councilman.
should we vote for you?
Good morning. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Governor Charles Baker and Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito for their confidence in making this nomination. Special thanks also to Robert Ross, Lauren Green, the staff and members of the Judicial Nominating Commission for their assistance and counsel, aiding not only me, but all the nominees who've reached this point during this new COVID environment. Thank you also to the members of this Executive Council for having me here today and for the time you spent getting to know more about me during the last couple of weeks. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversations we had, and I'm grateful for your candor and your advice and a few laughs along the way. I'm certainly grateful to my late parents, Carol and Michael Walsh, who are a constant inspiration to me and my family. High school sweethearts from St. Columbkille's Parish, and raised us in as we like to call it, a three-decker in the Bug Village section of Brighton. My dad, a quality control engineer with Raytheon Company, and my mother, an administrative assistant. Their love and guidance gave me the moral compass, which has directed my life. I'm everything. I am as a person, husband, father, neighbor, and lawyer because of my parents. And they would have loved this entire process, but I know that you're tuned in from heaven in their recliners watching. Thanks also to my brother Mike, sisters Linda and Jane, and my in-laws and the Brady family for their love and support. I'm blessed to have married the smartest person I know. Anne Elizabeth Walsh is the straw that stirs the Walsh family drink. She's a devoted mother, stellar attorney, all the while making time to serve as a town meeting member, docent coordinator, community volunteer, and role model for our family. And as you heard from Judge Farrell, we are the proud parents of Celia, a senior at the Walsh School of Foreign Service, no relation, Georgetown University, Jenna, a sophomore at the College of the Holy Cross, Nolan, who was a senior at the Roxbury Latin School, Riley, a junior at Notre Dame Academy, who will be off to my alma mater in 2 years to play lacrosse at Boston University, and Liam, star of our family, the fifth grader from Old Post Road Elementary School, all of whom I love and everything else my being. From my wife, our children have learned that when you work hard and it leads to success, you direct your energy to creating opportunities for other people and meaningfully serve your community whenever possible. And we've encouraged our children to be good people in school, in their activities, and out in the community. Would not be here today unequivocally without Anne's unwavering support, counsel, and love. I'm grateful for all the wonderful teachers at Boston Latin Academy, Boston University, and Suffolk University Law School who challenged me, who nurtured my academic curiosity, and so meaningfully impacted my life. I'm equally indebted to so many judges who've had a profound effect on me, including longtime mentor, the late Judge Conrad Bletzer, my former law school instructor and fellow Brighton native, Judge Bob Rufo, and longtime friend and classmate, and now Walpole neighbor for some years, Jim Stanton. I must recognize and extend my gratitude to Frank Bellotti and the entire Arbella family for being a world-class company and community leader. I'm indebted to Roberta Fitzpatrick, who was with me today, for taking a chance on a young lawyer and being a role model of the highest character and skill. My colleagues in Roberta's office have made it so much more than a place to work, and I would be lost without them. Lastly, I'm so thankful for someone who told me he would never let me get hurt when I first stood before the court as a young knock-kneed prosecutor, and he never has. I'm grateful for Judge William Farrell being here today and being such an influential part of my life. My journey has been influenced heavily by my Brighton roots. I started working at age 14, trucking to City Hall on the Green Line to get my working papers. I've worked in a myriad of capacities, which has allowed me to gain invaluable experience helping people. It set the tone for my legal career. I learned very early that it should never be about wins and losses, but rather doing what's right and doing it the right way, all in the name of helping someone who needs you. One of my favorite movies is A Bronx Tale. And in one scene, the youngster in Calogero learns about the door test. After opening his date's car door, he walks around the back and questions whether she'll reach over to unlock his door. And I've always hoped that my adversaries would say that I passed the beer test. Maybe that I was the type of person who was a zealous advocate and skilled attorney, but more importantly, played by the rules, didn't cut corners, was honest and had respect for my adversaries and the law, and might be kind of fun to have a drink or a meal with after a hard-fought court battle. I've always been of the opinion that the profession of law is not as big as one would think, that my reputation and my word are everything to me, and that you will likely work with attorneys many times over in your career. That same is true for the many courthouses I've been in across the Commonwealth in which I've been privileged to work. My respect and admiration is deep for the court officers who greet you at the door, clerks behind the counter and in the sessions, the probation professionals, the DAs and defense attorneys, and the judges who work tirelessly to create a welcoming and orderly environment for all of us to have our days in court. The biggest compliment that anyone could pay to me is that I was fair, prepared, collegial, armed with a sense of humor. It's those very qualities I hope to bring to the bench if appointed. Empathy, compassion, and strength of one's convictions are not buzzwords to be thrown around lightly, but should be ingrained in a judge, someone who has the power to take someone's liberty, someone who must issue unpopular rulings, and someone who must follow the law and apply it accordingly after careful and sensitive consideration of the facts and circumstances in each individual case. I'm confident that my career has afforded me the opportunity to handle a myriad of cases that find their home in the people's court, the district court. Cases and people who find their way in search of someone who can help them. I will encounter people from all walks of life, socioeconomic background, profession, race, and sexual orientation seeking access to justice and equal protection under the law. I hope to draw on my experiences living and working with folks suffering from addiction, mental illness, homelessness, abuse and abandonment, those struggling against racism, and those coping with sexual identity. I will use every resource at my disposal to compassionately, empathetically, and professionally safeguard that right and apply the law accordingly in each instance. So many people have helped me over the years in countless ways that lead me here today. And should I gain your vote, I will endeavor to pay it forward to the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. And I want to thank you also for bringing just two witnesses to this hearing. As you can see, we have a pretty good distance between everybody here, but the COVID is still raging and breakthrough COVID is still there. And so we don't want to have any counselor or anybody showing up here or any staff member contacting that. So we just show respect to everybody by keeping it down. We're able to stay in this chamber rather than go somewhere else.
I certainly understood those concerns. It was my pleasure.
Councilor Ferrer is with us and Councilor Ionel. Councilor Kennedy.
Just a couple of questions. One of the issues that people brought up is the somewhat lack of criminal experience that you have. You're not without criminal experience. You do have some further back in time, which I think you can carry that with you. It's like riding a bicycle. But what you do have is a lot of courtroom experience, correct? Spent a lot of time doing civil cases over the years in the district courts.
Absolutely.
One of the things that people don't realize is that there are more filings in the district courts for civil cases than there are criminal, significantly more. And my experience, I do both, criminal and civil, as you know. And the district court judges have a tendency to run away from the civil, always prioritizing the criminal cases when they're on for trial. And I'm sure you've experienced that. You go up for court, you get your witnesses there, you're ready to go on a civil case, and you get, sorry, we have 2 criminal trials ahead of you. Happens all the time, right?
Yes, it does.
And you would agree with me that it's important that those civil litigants get their day in court as well.
Absolutely.
And you would agree with me, based on your experience, it's certainly been mine, that the majority of the district court judges come from a background that is criminal in nature, in terms of their practices. That's important. Obviously, when you're dealing with criminal cases, it's important that we have people that know what they're doing, liberties at stake, which is more important than money, right?
Yes, it is.
But there's certainly a lack of experience on the district court bench in terms of the civil side. And I think that's something that has to get filled as well. And I think you bring that to the table. I think that's very important. I think you could be a valuable resource to your colleagues. I mean, Judge Farrell was well known when he was a clerk for his experience in the civil background, and people would use him as a resource. Judges would use him as a resource all the time. He has a criminal background as well, a criminal legal background, Judge, just so it's clear. But I think it's important what you're bringing, and I think that it's something the district court needs. Would I like you to have more criminal experience? Sure. Would I like you to have more recent criminal experience? Sure. I think you're bringing something very valuable to the district court, and it's something that we need. I deal with insurance defense lawyers all the time in my practice. And, they have an important role. But when you're coming from an insurance defense firm, doing primarily defense work, right? I just want you to remember one thing that you bring it to when you go to the bench. If the plaintiffs don't win sometime, we don't need insurance defense lawyers anymore either. I'll be voting for you next week.
Thank you very much, Counsel.
Councilor DiPaolo.
Thank you. Good morning. One thing that I just noted as you and your witnesses were sharing with us, and that I've noted, I've been very happy to note in the progression of our nominees, is that issues of racial disparities and mental health are always mentioned, and not just, I think, because the council is going to ask about it, but because the bar has recognized what an important opportunity it is for the courts to find some ways to do better. And so on those two issues, regarding mental health, we know, if we follow the news, that not only is this, of course, an ongoing issue, but we have this issue in Boston in particular at Mass and Cass, where now we have folks being brought into the system ostensibly for not only the fact that it's not safe to have folks living in the street as winter comes, but all the issues of substance abuse and addiction. And we already have at least one case where prosecution and defense were asking for a detox treatment facility, and they were denied. And of course, other cases where treatment facilities were offered. And we don't know I don't know the particular instances of each case, but I'm wondering, as folks come before you who are dealing with substance abuse and probably underlying trauma, since that's usually the case, what are you thinking? How are you going about exercising your discretion in that instance?
Thank you for the question. I've had personal experiences within my own extended family with issues of substance abuse and mental illness, so I am very sensitive to that. And I think that for the district court, there are a number of resources that are available short of incarceration. And I know that as much as we talk about the opioid epidemic that we're up against a mental health epidemic as well. And I think that in many cases, these are folks who are desperately seeking the mental health treatment that they need and can't find it. As you well know from the Department of Justice study on mental health in our correction system in Massachusetts, that's a real hot issue, that you look and see what's going on to some of these folks that are not getting the services. They're locked, as Judge Farrell said, in a cage, and they're not getting the services, or they're basically left to their own devices, sometimes for 23 hours a day, whether it's suicide or self-harm. So I'm very sensitive to that, and to maybe redirect some of these folks, or to reallocate our resources to get them the much-needed treatment they need instead of incarceration, I think should be at the forefront, particularly in the district court, where we see a lot of these folks who should not be incarcerated, that they are harming themselves or with drugs, are unable to get the very counseling and services that they need. So I'm very sensitive to that and would look very favorable on those alternative measures as a district court judge.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that perspective, certainly in our district court. And Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions.
Thank you very much, Counsel.
Councilor Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Thank you for your, it was nice speaking with you the other day.
Well, it was a pleasure talking with you as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your past service, not only in the court system as an ADA back in the day, but also for your work in the community, on the school committee, the zoning board. I was a cop for 30 years, and I understand how important it is to be involved with your community and Little League and all that stuff that you do. So that's great. You have two admirers that I have as admirers myself. The first is Jay Lynch, who I've been working with for 29 years now. Superb human being, exceptional, phenomenal civil trial lawyer. Some mostly civil defense, but I've been there for 28 years and only do plaintiff work, so I've seen both sides. He has tried cases with you. He has great respect for you and your abilities. And Frank Bellotti sent a letter as well. Highest regards from Mr. Bellotti, of course. I agree with Councilor Kennedy. As a matter of fact, late last night, I was driving home from Lynch and Lynch, and I called the judge and asked about you. And she said, you know, Joe, we really need people with civil background. We don't really have a lot of that in the district court, and I agree. And I actually didn't realize that there's more civil filings than criminal in some of the district courts. So I think you're going to make a great asset to the court. I think you'll be hearing most of those cases because a lot of the lifetime ADAs run away from them, I think, you know. And I think you're going to be great, and you certainly have my support next week.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Brian Ella.
Thank you very much. Actually, you and I had a long conversation. You know, I do agree with Councilor Kennedy. A lot of the district court judges have criminal experience, and not many of them have civil experience. You actually have a good combination. You have limited criminal experience, but you have extensive civil experience. So that's good. But a question on the criminal side. I'm a believer to give people a second, third chance if the circumstances warrant. I'm a believer, again, if the circumstances warrant it, to have some rehabilitated as opposed to being incarcerated. Your thoughts on that?
I concur 100%, particularly even in the juvenile session where I had extensive experience when I was in the DA's office. Sometimes those folks need a little bit of redirection away from that. Sometimes not a scared straight, but oftentimes that very first experience might be enough. And then it's really the obligation of our court system to help rehabilitate. So I concur, particularly when we talk about drug cases. You know, there may be folks that are fighting addiction, should not be incarcerated. They should be getting the treatment that they deserve and need. So yes, I'm fully on board with second chances, and even in some instances, third and fourth chances for folks that are dealing with issues that are, yes, technically criminal, but could be better suited by rehabilitation programs, diversion courts, specialty courts, things of that nature. So yes, I'm fully endorse
I
that.
appreciate the answer. I've always been a fighter for the little guy, the little people. You work for Arbella, big corporation. You work for the DA's office. You know, those are big companies, okay? Obviously, the district attorney's not a company, but it's a lot of employees. There are a lot of lawyers out there, you know, who have sole practitioners, and they may only have, you know, I don't know, just by themselves, or maybe a paralegal, maybe just by themselves, with no one. I want to make sure if they come before you, that you're amenable to granting continuances, because you're working for Arbella, there's hundreds of employees there. They got millions of dollars. They're worth a lot of money. District attorney's office, they got hundreds of employees. Like I said, I'm for the little guy. So if a lawyer comes before you, you know, sole practice, doesn't come from a big firm. You know, has to worry about paying the rent, the electric bill. You know, I have to worry about paying office supplies. So if that person needs to have a continuance, maybe even another continuance, your thoughts on that? Sure.
I've been liberal in that as a practitioner, and just so you know, as big as Arbella is as a company, our in-house firm has 9 total staff people, 5 of which are lawyers. Only 2 do insurance defense, so the litigation that goes on in the district court. So I'm with you when sometimes somebody needs a continuance or I need one and I don't have another associate or another partner to send to that event. So I'm very sensitive to that. I understand what it takes to run a practice when you're the only one. You're the chief cook, bottle washer, bookkeeper, and rainmaker. So I am sensitive to that. I don't think in my 20-some-odd years of practicing that I've ever had interrogatories or requests for production done within the 30 and 45-day time, because I know the other side is in the same boat. I think that's the collegiality piece that I really enjoy in my practice, that I sort of made a pact with myself years ago. There were certain things I would take home, but my job would not kill me. I would not let it get to me. I would work through these things with other attorneys, and I think continuance is a perfect example of that. And I've always been very liberal, and I would continue to do that as a judge, certainly.
Thank you, I appreciate that. My last question is, again, I want to keep reiterating, I'm the little guy. You know, You know better than anyone here. Somebody has a personal injury case. Our Bella's gonna win, whether it's the district court, the superior court, the judge will, I'm sure, confirm. They're gonna win most of the time. There's no question. You agree with that?
To an extent, I do, yes. I know we,
I think I saw some statistics when we talk about split the fall cases, for automobile cases, at trial, it's real tough. So, one thing is closing argument. Okay, just this Supreme Judicial Court has made some great changes, great decisions. Jury instructions, great decision, getting rid of that word substantial. Now, the legislature, on closing argument, now gives, this is recent, gives the plaintiff's attorney, okay? You know, he or she can make this argument, it's going on for a few years now. You know, recommend to the jury, or request from the jury, I'm looking for 10,000, 20,000, whatever. The legislature, when they did that, didn't give any ability to the insurer to say, because right now, the insurer goes first. And then after the insurer makes their closing argument, then it's the plaintiff's side. So the legislature says, okay, after the defense does their closing, now it's the plaintiff's chance. And the plaintiff can tell the jury, hey, we're looking for any amount of money. There are few, and I don't like it because I'm getting I don't want to say inundated, but I'm getting calls from plaintiff's attorney who don't like what judges are doing. I don't know what Judge Farrell's doing. Some judges let the defense, they make their argument, the plaintiff's attorneys make theirs. What happens is, some defense attorneys, it's getting more and more, file a motion and say, hey, listen, before the plaintiff's attorney, I want to know before the trial or before the closing argument, what he's going to ask the jury for. How much money? Because I want to be able to respond to that in my closing. You follow me? So he wants to know, the defense attorney wants to know what the hell the plaintiff's attorney's got to tell the jury. I mean, to me, that's absurd. And the legislature could have given that, could have put that in the language. But they didn't. They left that out. They said the plaintiff can request, you know, X amount of dollars. So some judges are saying, whoa, 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 no. We're not going to let the defense know what the plaintiff's attorney is going to recommend to the jury. Some judges are saying, yeah, I think it's fair. I think you should tell the plaintiff's attorney should tell the insurer, the defendant, you know, the insurance company beforehand what you're going to ask in closing arguments. And then there's a third argument. Some other judges are saying, well, no, defense goes first, then the plaintiff, but then I'll give the defense an additional 5 minutes after the close of the plaintiff's case. So I'm getting a lot of calls saying, find out what judges are doing. The nominee last week, this is a great one, she said, no way would I give them an additional 5 minutes, and no way would I let them know what the plaintiff's going to ask the jury.
I think I concur, because I would be asked to interpret the law as it stands. If that's the law, that the plaintiff gets to put that in, I would follow the law, unless and until there is a change of the legislature.
Yeah, yeah, so, well, I won't hear down the road that, you know, this Judge Walsh, I had a case with him, and now he lets the defense look, ask, he wants to know what the plaintiff's lawyers asking. I won't hear that from you. Well, that's good, and the reason I say it, it's just another advantage. But if you did allow it, it's another advantage for the insurance companies. They win most of these cases. Give me a break. The little guy out there. That's who I have always been a supporter of. But now that you answered all my questions. Councilor Juvenville is the big supporter of yours. Kennedy, as well. So when you come before us next week, I'll be more than happy to support you. I do want to say that I also got a call from Frank Bellotti. The guy is still working, he's been around how many hundreds of years? Yeah, he's great. He's amazing, he's great, but he wanted to make that call from you. Again, be looking forward to support you, and it's good to see you, Judge.
Thank you very much, Council.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Counselor Hurley, are you on the line?
She's going to the doctor today.
Yeah, but she said she'd be on the line. Somebody just told me she's on the line. Do we know if Counselor Hurley can hear us?
She can.
She speak?
Hello.
Call on me, I guess.
Hello.
Do you have any questions, Counselor Hurley?
Oh, boy.
Yes, just a few. Hi. I just have a few questions. You don't have much criminal experience, but have you had occasion to sit in on trials, criminal trials, or criminal motions to suppress?
Yes, I have, Counselor. It's actually over the last few years, as we talked about, I may end up in a court session on a very brief matter, a case management conference, or even a civil pretrial, but that may require me to be in the courtroom for 2.5 hours until my case is called. So I've had the occasion to have criminal events go on in between those civil ones right in front of me, as well as spending some time in sessions throughout the court to watch suppression hearings, jury trials, restraining order, you name it. And that's really been a focus of mine over the past several years to sort of maximize the time that I'm there and get to those criminal sessions.
Well, you have certainly a great deal of civil experience, but you do have some catching up to do as far as the criminal side of things. And no matter what court you go to, you can be guaranteed that there's going to be a lot of criminal activity as well as civil in some of them. So I would suggest you're familiar with the district court. The fact that Judge Farrell came to testify for you speaks volumes, and I very much respect his opinion on things, and I did talk to him about you. So I'm not saying yes or no, but I will give you due consideration next week.
Thank you very much, Counsel. Thank you.
All right. Yep, bye.
Counselor Devaney?
Me? Calling me?
Yes,
Oh, wow, okay. Nice to see you again.
pleasure to see you as
It's
well.
such a pleasure to meet you.
You as well.
Find out all about your family and how you got here. I first want to say, I have to, right off the bat, mention Frank Bellotti. And Frank couldn't say enough about you. And, for someone to say that they've been a trial lawyer for more than 70 years, and he said, I believe that I can judge what is required. And I think that's the greatest endorsement you could have. He's my hero. He should have been governor. Enough said. Enough said. You're too young to remember that election. He was screwed out of that. We'll let it go. Anyway, yeah, that was with Arbella Insurance. And he has worked with you 18 years, and he knows your temperament. And he, to me, that was the greatest tribute. And your witnesses, what's better than having, Attorney Fitzpatrick, who was your direct supervisor for how many years? 14 years. And then to have...
About 18 now.
Right, and Judge Farrell. So I couldn't be more pleased with the people who are endorsing you. So first of all, I want to apologize that we've been having hearings for over 60 years, and we've had hearings all through the pandemic, and the nominee has been ensuring that the people who are invited, and only people who we have the name and we give to the front is allowed to come into the State House because it's closed. So we know people are coming in and safe. If the nominee feels that person's not safe, then we welcome them on Zoom. Having said that, in over 60 years, you are the third in this last month who has been directed by your counselor who presides over the district, nominee, not to bring anyone.
Excuse me,
Okay.
excuse me, I'm the chair and I'm excusing you. Now, wait till I'm done.
I waited till last. and
Wait
now
till I'm done.
My turn.
Wait till I'm done. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to apologize for this committee. We have no way of knowing who's been vaccinated or who isn't coming into this chamber. If you don't care about catching the disease, that's fine. We do in this chamber. And that's the way we're gonna do it.
Can I continue? First of all, I just want to tell you, there's no one in this room that is more sensitive to coronavirus. I lost my last two sisters to coronavirus in this year, okay? It hurts me to even say that. I'm the last left, no siblings. So no one's more careful than that. I would have welcomed to see your grown children and your fifth grader and your wife. This is an important time. The last hearing, the spouse's husband was sitting in the lobby through the whole thing. This is not an interview for Macy's. This is a lifetime position, and it should be shared with your family. So regardless of everybody's else philosophy, I come from a family who lost, and I'm Catholic. We couldn't even have a wake or a funeral from one of my sisters. So I know what people are going through. And there's no way that I'm going to let anyone in this room who the nominee can't tell me they're safe. And this is how it's always been. So having said that, I ask all the nominees this. And thank you for all the time. Again, I thank you. I don't know whether you talked to Judge Farrell. I think they were flipping the lights with us, were they? Yes, I think so. Okay. So, right. So anyway, first of all, I want to ask you, as I ask for all nominees, the journey in coming here. This is your first time applying.
It is.
Wow, bingo. Aren't you lucky? Thank you. And I got to tell you, you have the age. You have the life experience, you have the qualifications that I look for, okay? And the 40-year-olds, I don't see that. I mean, when I see your involvement with people and community, and recently I had a JNC questionnaire, someone coming through, and he said, to be a judge, you should first have commitment for people and your community. And this is it, you've had it. I mean, you have been in the American Legion Boys Day program, and I love that because I've been a member of the American Legion Women's Auxiliary for, like 20 years.
Good supporters of the Boy State program.
Yeah, no.
Came every year to help staff it.
Thanks, yeah.
Certainly do.
We can't forget the veterans. So, and then going into the Walpole School as a guest reader, chaperone, panelist, and what I love is that what you have brought your children to, and I wish they were here, I would thank them, that they have volunteered in the Council of Aging, delivering food and supplies to people. That's what you've taught them. And this is, I think we're losing in this generation, that we don't see it enough, I should say. And in church, your involvement in CCD, in UI and your children as lectors and altar service. And one of my boys was an altar boy till he was 18. So I don't know whether he'll be in my church. But no, all of the things that you've done. Now, I particularly like writings. We don't see a lot of writings in our questionnaire. I was very interested in finding out your writing. All good lawyers fight, but not all feel good about it. Tell me about that. Tell us about it.
Sure, thank you for the question. I wrote an article several years ago for Mass Lawyers Weekly, and really the premise of the article was in my estimation, having looking back on almost 20 years in practice, the need for civility in civil practice, the way that attorneys interact with one another, the way they solve problems outside of court. You know, you could go into a session in an afternoon and hear 7 or 8 or 9 discovery motions, and you may scratch your head and wonder, why couldn't they have worked this out? Why couldn't the sides got on the phone? And yes, there are issues that sometimes need the help of a judge or a magistrate to sort of iron out. But I've always been of the opinion, and it served me well, to develop and nurture relationships with attorneys, because you know you're going to see them over and over again, particularly in the area that I practice in, or if, for example, it was Counselor Ionella or Counselor Kennedy, who are in the district court seeing the same DAs over and over again. The same is true with judges. And so I was sitting there one night and I put together an article. It was not a how-to manual, or it was not preachy. It was just some of my own reflections on things that had happened during my career and how I handled them. One example would be just calling somebody's office, calling an attorney's office and getting a secretary on the phone. It may be just for a few seconds saying, you know, it's Attorney Brian Walsh, is so-and-so in, and how's your day going? And they might say, oh, geez, you know, it's going okay, but nobody listens. I said, that's why I stopped complaining. And just that little connection, I don't know, at the end of the day, it might sound corny, but it makes me feel good. Makes me feel that that person's just not a conduit, and they get to know me the next time I'll call. Maybe we'll have a little further dialogue. That's just one example of the way that I've tried to conduct myself, and have had many similar exchanges with great attorneys on the other side. That's what makes the system work, in my estimation.
Right.
When you go for a final pretrial conference, a judge is going to want to know, are you able to work with the other side to maybe come up with an agreed upon exhibit list? Are there motions in limine you can agree upon? And then we'll iron out the ones that you couldn't reach. And it saves a lot of time. I use the word streamlining. You may want to try to streamline a case for trial because it saves time and expense. It also helps the presentation of the case to a jury or to a judge, if you can do that. So communication for me has been the epitome of my career. It's what I need to do as an insurance defense attorney because I have to report to claims adjusters. Although my clients are our insureds, the adjusters are the ones who control the money. They're the ones who ultimately I work for. So it's kind of a triumvirate where communication is so crucial in what I do. It also carries over to the way you conduct yourself in court. So that article was really fun to write. I didn't know if it would ever get published. They have a picture of a couple of boxing gloves on the front of it. I did not title the article. It was done by the editors, but it was really fun to write. Maybe someday I can follow that up, hopefully, as a judge, sort of a part 2 down the road. But that's what that was about. So thank you for asking.
And also, I was impressed with you authoring and presenting training modules. Now, one of them, of all of them, I'm only going to ask one, and you're going to say, why that? Dog bite liability.
I knew you were going to ask that.
You know, I love animals, but I've got to tell you, I have to preface that and say that in my 21 years, I've only had one nominee that got an award from the Animal Rescue League. And you know who that was?
No.
Judge Pomeroy.
Ah,
Michael Pomeroy. And he had presented a lot of cases against dog cruelty and dog abuse. And he was out with the lawyers, and they said, we're going to stop here. And they went into the building, and it was a party. It was a recognition for him from the Animal Rescue League. Isn't that beautiful?
Great.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about a particular case. I like to follow up on cases, and this went to the appeals court. And there was a man walking 2 dogs. One was on a leash, and a German Shepherd was walking free with him. He approached this house, a private home, and the woman was out on the lawn with a little dog. The German Shepherd rushed and started literally tearing this dog apart. Now, when it went to court, the judge ruled the dog is property. And she was suing for $4,000. The dog survived, and she was asking for payment for the surgery. And the judge ruled the dog was property, and she'll only get $400. And it went to the appeals court. And it's not what the appeals court I know, but having you been involved in this liability, how would you have judged?
It's a great question. I hadn't encountered that. I know that, there used to be the old adage, you're entitled to one free bite. You didn't know your dog had that propensity, but that
It's
isn't,
dog property.
that isn't the law. I think in that situation, obviously, if there are damages that flow from the attack, inclination would be that you could award those damages. Again, I'm not versed on that.
Well, it went to appeals court, and they did. They did award her $4,000 for the surgery for the dog. So I always remembered that, I thought that was interesting. So, one of the cases that you mentioned, and I like your writings. I like your writing. And if you could talk about the writing that you put in here, and you did talk about the case. I've never heard of this, and I have heard, a couple of cases through the years, crematories, having the wrong body or really desecrating the body or whatever. That was very interesting. This is the first one, it's the first person that's come before us with that kind of a case, so why don't you tell us about that one?
That was a case that arose out of a crematorium up in New Hampshire. And I think the case originated by an investigation into alleged misconduct by a medical examiner signing death certificates for folks who were brought to that crematory. There were later allegations that the crematory was alleged to have commingled folks in the cremation process, such that when the cremains were returned to families, they weren't certain who was in the container because the allegations were more than one body.
How would you know? God forgive me. How would you know?
Quite honestly, I think at the time that happened, at least from the state police reports, there may have been evidence that they saw things like that happening at the day that they seized the property and secured it. So that's really where it came out of. And my role in that case came because there were a number of funeral homes throughout New England who had used the services of the crematorium, and there were negligence-based actions against not only the crematorium and its owners, but also a myriad of funeral homes. So that was my role, as some funeral homes that were involved were insured by Arabella. So that was my role in the case.
Okay, I want to go back. This is something I asked all the nominees, the process. First time you applied, and you got an invitation to go before the Judicial Nominating Commission. These are 21 lawyers that every governor appoints to a Judicial Nominating Commission, 21 lawyers, and they have the awesome responsibility to decide if you're going to get an interview and if you're going to be recommended. We don't have any of that authority. People think that. I have you, but I don't know who applied, I don't know how many. So my concern is that those 21 people do the vetting, and they have investigated, and they have seen you, and they've gone to the hearing, and so forth. So tell me, out of the 21, how many of those members were there?
My interview was in March of 2020, just about a week before the pandemic shut everything down, as you well know, and Judge Farrell behind me knows all too well, scheduled for the next week.
Sure.
I know at that point that they were doing panels. They were splitting members of the JNC because I think on my evening there may have been 4 candidates who came in.
Can I tell you?
Sure.
This is the decision of the chair, Dacia. There should be 21 people there. When I was first elected, there was a JNC chair, and he sat down those 21 lawyers and said, you have an awesome responsibility to choose someone who's going to have a lifetime position as a judge or a clerk magistrate to recommend to the governor. If you're not at that nominee's hearing, you don't vote for the nominee. Not so now. We have 6 here and 8 here, and everybody votes. And I can't do anything about it. And I keep on venting here, but it doesn't go anywhere. And I wish people out there would say, hey, that chair has to be removed. He's not following. This is the order, executive order of the governor, 21. And they're charged to meet with you, not put 6 here, 8 there. And I know they don't call, they don't check. And we have found when it comes here that there's something. And I have been here when someone has been removed when we found out something. That's not the 11th hour decision. That should be the J and C, but it's not being done. And it doesn't apply to you, and thank you for letting me vent.
And I think to answer your question, just so I can
Sure.
complete, my thought was, I believe in my panel, there were 7 members present in the room. One was on.
On the phone.
Yes.
Did that person ask a question?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes, it did.
That's original. Okay. So yeah, 7 people and, so let's say 8. And
Yes.
21 voted. Okay. Just, that's for the record.
Sure.
I like to be informed of people because a lot of them don't know the process and they think the council has all this authority. It's the 21 lawyers who do. And yet they're not charged to go as a group. In this administration, in the Baker administration, there's never been 21 members at any nominees hearing or interview that they have. So just want to say that in the record. So so tell me, what case do you feel was really memorable to you that you will always remember, that it you know, maybe it was rewarding, maybe it was disappointing, the result? Tell us about that.
Sure. We had an opportunity to talk about this, and the boy's name, Ryan, will stay with me forever. It was a civil case. It involved a horrific motor vehicle bicycle accident. Ryan was an 11-year-old boy who lived in the suburbs, and he was on the way home from a neighbor's house, and he had to drive down a side street to a main road in which he lived. My clients happened to own the corner house that abutted the side street and the main street. It was bordered on both sides by shrubs, bushes that were trimmed and maintained, as you see all throughout New England. And Ryan, on this particular day, got to the end of the side street. His normal route would be to stop, turn left, and ride the sidewalk down to where his house was, and then cross the main road. On this particular day, for whatever reason, it appears Ryan did not do that, and he rode his bike out into traffic. He was not struck by a truck. He actually rode into the side of a dump truck. And I'll never forget that the passenger, when the case went into litigation, the dump truck passenger testified that he was chatting with his boss, and when he turned his head somewhat in his peripheral vision, all he could see was the face of a little boy coming towards him. So I will spare you the details. But Ryan's parents, I think his dad looked outside and thought he should be home for dinner. When he peeked out, he noticed down the road, he saw first responder lights, so he thought he should walk down. And I'll never forget, his father said he looked down at the grass and Ryan's bicycle helmet was still on the front lawn. He walked down the road to where the incident occurred and got every parent's worst nightmare. Ryan died shortly after at the scene of the accident. I tell you that case, from a legal standpoint, it is not the most groundbreaking. It was a pure negligence action against my clients. There were other allegations against the truck driver, and you should know he was not speeding, not under the influence of alcohol or drugs. He had reached a point of no return at the time the young boy ran into the truck, so he was cleared of criminal charges. An awful, unfortunate case to have. I can't imagine, because it's the parent's worst nightmare, losing a child, to be involved in that litigation, and the collegiality between the defense lawyers and the plaintiff's lawyer, knowing full well that we had a job to do, but these parents had suffered an immeasurable loss. They had no dog in this fight. They needed to be treated with the utmost.
Child too.
I believe he was an only child.
Not losing a child is hard enough, yeah.
You know, I can't fathom it. And this family needed to be treated with the utmost respect and dignity in a way that I had never had to think about before. So it taught me many lessons about practicing law with sensitive information and sensitive people and feelings. It taught me immeasurable lessons about being a parent. And my wife and I were militant about, and we live on a cul-de-sac where there are only 2 other homes. If you go out of that driveway at any point with anything that has wheels on it, scooter, rollerblades, you name it, that helmet is on. It just reinforced that, because that night I got to go home and hug my children. That family could never do that again. Now you bring that into a courtroom or a litigation process. Those are very difficult issues. If you have to depose a family who's lost a child, they were blameless in this situation. I was most proud of the attorneys that I worked with, because we got together and we handled it, in my estimation, professionally and sensitively, putting other people's feelings first, all in the name of completing a very difficult job. It's a case that will stay with me forever, not only as a parent, but as a lawyer, and most importantly, just as a person. That could have been my neighbor, your neighbor. How many times have you heard folks back out of the driveway and they didn't see that?
Their own child.
I can't even imagine the pain and the loss. I know it made me a better person to be exposed to that and handle it and do the right thing.
No,
Resolve that case.
you know, everyone loses on that, and they all will have that memory forever. And I know on a personal level, my mother and father's only son drowned, and they had 3 daughters. So I came into this world with big disappointment. But I have to tell you, it's nothing that ever goes away. Even though I came in a few years later into this world, I didn't know I was born into a family that were grieving. And it's there forever. And you have to pray for the person who hit the little boy. That's something,
No doubt about it.
I mean, must have nightmares the rest of his life.
He did, and we got to talk to him at length on the record and off the record, and you hit the nail on the head. That the sympathy for that gentleman, that he has to live with that every day, knowing he did absolutely nothing wrong, that was little consolation to him. He'll carry that with him forever.
The thing is that the things that you've been involved in, like I said, that's why I like your age. I like your experience, being a parent, being involved in all of these things. And I particularly, I know I want you to talk on this, about the battered women's advocacy program. Tell me your involvement in that.
Sure. I was a student at Suffolk University Law School. That was the title of the program at the time, and it was a wonderful opportunity to provide assistance to people who were in very difficult relationships, folks that were seeking orders of protection, abuse prevention orders. They have been victims of sex crimes. They have been victims of relationship abuse. The program, I've spent a couple of days a week at the Somerville District Court, acting kind of like a victim witness advocate, guiding people through the process of filling out their affidavits and appearing before a judge to get an ex parte order of protection, and then guiding them through the process of their hearing that would take place generally about 10 days later. Oftentimes, the defendant would be then present as the person would then request an extension of the order. We also staffed a hotline, so there would be evenings that I would go to an office building near the university and staff a hotline for people who were in crisis who could call that may need emergency services or housing, whatever they needed, we were there at their disposal. Wonderfully meaningful opportunity. I had not experienced that in my life. I did not come from a background or a family where that thing was present. I learned very quickly how present it is in the lives of so many people. It was a very gratifying way to spend a year, and I enjoyed it very much. It was painful, and I can understand the burnout factor for a lot of folks that work supporting those folks, but it is God's work. It was probably one of the most meaningful years that I had spent. So.
The reason that I picked that out to talk about, and we didn't when we met before, I didn't mention it, because that's why I ran for governor's council. And I didn't even know what a governor's council was, because on the ballot it says councilor. And I asked Bill Galvin, why don't you put governors in front of it? And he said, it's legislation, it's been there 100 years, and that's how it goes. So anyway, I had a friend, and she was in a very dangerous situation. And she had a boyfriend, and I don't know what she saw in him, and I knew he was a bad guy, but anyway, it got to be really bad, and he was physically abusive. And she had gone to court 7 times, hoping to get some relief from the judge. The 8th time she was going, my late husband was a firefighter, and he worked very closely with the police. And one of the fellows had gone to school with my husband, and he asked him if he would go with my friend the 8th time. And so a police officer friend said to the judge, she fears for her life. Give him a $400,000 bail. $200,000. And the judge said $200,000. So out of fear, she paid it. Then the judge said to my friend, you have been wasting my time and wasting the court's time. And our friend, the police officer, said, the boyfriend was out the door before I was. My friend was dead in 2 weeks. He killed her. So I didn't know whether judges got appointed by the governor. I was never involved in that. And so I found out And I looked into what governor's council does, and I said, yeah, I can do that. So that's how it happened. And I said, if there's any way to prevent anyone to be on the bench, I'm gonna do it. And so that's how it happened. So I thank you for that involvement, and it's happening more often now. What I'm concerned about is these mothers who let the boyfriend rape and kill their children, literally, and that's all we're hearing lately. And it really breaks my heart. It's a whole different society, isn't it? It really is. So I do like your answer on the qualities to be a judge. And I agree with them. First of all, I mean, you said experience. Okay. The council just voted last month, not me, for a 40-year-old who had 2 jobs out of law school. One was one of 13 assistant solicitors in a city hall in an office, imagine, and the other was working for the sheriff. There was no involvement in helping anyone a pro bono or anything. And that's what we've got in the busiest, what, no criminal experience or anything. So when I see you got through, I said, hallelujah, Judge Farrell, because that's what we need. We need the good guys who are out there to protect, and I mean protect, and have the experience. And I feel if you don't have that experience as an attorney, you're reluctant to give the correct sentence to that criminal. You'd be timid. So, but I like what you said about temperament, of course, but the courage to follow the law and to have the highest character. Honesty, of course, is the first. But what came to mind when I read that was you went on in another section of the JNC talking about discretion. And I believe the judge should have discretion. So I almost know what you're going to answer when I ask you, what's your opinion of the minimum mandatory sentencing?
I appreciate that question.
I didn't even ask you that for the 4 hours, so I'm asking you now.
I'm not a fan of minimum mandatories for a myriad of reasons, but I think it does handcuff a judge's discretion. And as we talked about with some of the other counselors, doing that takes away a myriad of ways to resolve other than incarceration, for example. We talked about mental health, substance abuse counseling in the specialty courts, some of the diversionary programs, particularly in the juvenile area. So I think that when the more restraints that you put on a judge by legislation or otherwise, the sentencing judge is handcuffed, no pun intended. And I think it takes that creativity away from applying the law and an appropriate sentence to a specific, particular individual with a particular set of needs and circumstances. And I think the minimum mandatories take that away. So I would advocate for the broadest discretion that a judge can have.
Right. What do you see should be improved or changed in the municipal court that you're going to? Do you see anything that you?
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit in my JNC application. It was more of a suggestion, just an observation on the civil side. We attend case management conferences, and those are designed to get the parties together early on in a case to, as I mentioned before, maybe iron out areas of contention or try to get together and see if it's a case that could be resolved through attorney contact informally, through the court's alternative dispute resolution mediation programs, short of trial. The thing that I found in my experience has been those case management conferences could be not uniformly scheduled court to court. Sometimes you get one that's 3 months after the filing, other times you get one that's 10 or 11 months after the filing. And I think if there was some uniformity, we want to be far enough out that the parties, have talked around the case, have conducted some discovery, maybe taken some depositions, and know whether or not this is a case where there is a likelihood to resolve or try. I think that's helpful to the court because at the 3-month mark, for example, not much has been done. It's more of a placeholder, and you end up more times than not asking for a further case management conference. So you're sort of kicking the can down the road And then you have to get to the pretrial. So I mentioned that as a suggestion. It's not more of a problem, it's more of a streamline, sort of a workflow suggestion that I think now in particular, with the pandemic and all the cases that couldn't proceed on the civil side, they're now going to hit the court, and those events are going to be scheduled on top of the increased filings, as Councilor Kennedy mentioned. I think now with the jurisdictional amount in the district court being recently raised from 25,000 to 50,000, you're now going to see even more civil filings. So, without looking inward and say this may be a good opportunity for somebody who does have my experience to help with that backlog and that rush that we're going to see of civil filings in the next couple of years coming out of the pandemic. So, more of a suggestion, and I think with Zoom for some of these routine events, I think that's going to help to streamline some of these processes as well.
Have you been involved in specialty courts, and what's your opinion?
Love them. I love specialty courts. I had the opportunity to work with Judge Zimian years ago when he brought the South Boston Drug Court to Dorchester on Fridays when I was an ADA. It was a wonderful program, still continues to be. I mentioned this to you. I saw someone at Downtown Crossing several years ago. We had eye contact from across the street. I couldn't place the face, but he walked right over to me and said, Dorchester Court, 1999 or whatever it was. And right away it kicked me back. And I said, how you doing? And he said, job, married, 3 kids. That was the best thing that ever could have happened. Yes, there are failures in that program. There are some people who cannot complete it. It's rigorous, but it does provide that alternative to incarceration for people who are desperately crying out to help with issues of addiction, substance abuse, etc. Again, I'm a big proponent, a wonderful proponent of that. And also I worked in the juvenile court. So I had, being a city kid from Brighton, I was in Dorchester, and to see kids who were just like me from a different neighborhood who maybe had made some mistakes that with the right structure could be corrected, whether it's through restitutionary programs or diversion programs. I used to have a soft spot if I saw the kid went to Boston Latin Academy or one of the other schools that I was familiar with, because there, but for the grace of God, that could have been me or folks that I went to school just like me. So it was a pleasure to serve in those. I think they are greatly important to the court system.
Yeah, I've gone to drug court graduations, and I'll tell you, I sit there with tears in my eyes in the back because these people have gone, some of them are older, some of them are younger, and to hear their stories and their success to overcome drugs and alcohol and everything, it is amazing. So I like to get out there and say, like to go to the parole board, I want to see, how it's working and how these people treat people, and I sit in the back, so no one knows there. For example, at a parole board, I was surprised. It was a lifeless hearing, and members of the parole board were calling him sir. So you get a whole different picture when you're there than when you're outside to see that. Now you have been involved in a lot of mediation. Okay, so what type of mediation would you see as a judge when someone comes before you with mental issues or drug addictions? What kind of mediation?
I guess it would depend on the nature of if it was a criminal case or if it was someone who was unable to help themselves. Certainly, I think that the need would be identifying what the person's issue is, if it's mental health or if it's substance abuse, and getting them the appropriate treatment. I know as a prosecutor, that was something that was at the forefront that, I would get together with the defense attorney and, find out, does this person need an evaluation? Do they need, Bridgewater State mental health evaluation or examination by the court clinician to find out what is the nature and circumstance of this problem, be it substance abuse, mental health, or both, as we're seeing now a lot, an explosion that there are both at the same time. So, with regard to mediation, I guess my experience has been mediating in civil cases. So we may have, it could be an auto case, it could be a commercial liability case, when it really is a matter of money damages and trying to work out a resolution. So I haven't had experience with folks who I've represented in that context suffering from mental illness, but it does play a huge role. And I think on the criminal side, that's where I think my contact would be more with that.
Even starting out being accepted to Boston Latin Academy, standing. And also, for your years, even as a zoning board, on the zoning board, that's not always easy. And people can be really contentious coming in because they, you know, I've always said for me, it's not always popular to do the right thing. But we have to do the right thing no matter if you're the only one to do it. But and the zoning board, school committee, well, you get opposition, but I think zoning really hits home, literally. So I thank you for all of that you have, been out there helping people. And, I think, you're such a role model for your children, which is really something to serve, the homeless and people who need food or whatever, to make them aware. Because, we're living in a different generation. I'm thinking of when my husband was growing up, he delivered newspapers. When did you last see a child deliver newspapers? And just a personal thing, I met this elderly woman last year, and she asked me, she said, "Was Jack Devaney your husband?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "I'm going to tell you a story. When he was a little boy, he was delivering papers, and it was in a snowstorm. And she says he was covered with snow, he was freezing. And she says, and I went to my mother and said, 'Mom, there's a paper boy out here and he's freezing.' She said, my mother brought him in and made him some hot chocolate." I thought, what a great, isn't that nice,
Absolutely.
But anyway, or how about all summer long getting up at 6 in the morning and caddying? Are you kidding me? You're going to get a kid to do that.
Yeah.
So I think in getting them in church and getting them involved in serving people who are homeless or people who don't have food for Thanksgiving or whatever, or clothes, that's wonderful. So
I'll give all the credit in the world to my wife. She's the one who spearheads that effort and has had such a great influence on the kids to want to do it. We
exactly.
go to Christmas Eve Mass or Christmas Day Mass.
So thank them for me.
There's a good chance 4 Walshes are.
Just thank children for me. But, this is what makes the whole person. And that's why it's so important for me to meet with you. People say, "Why do you meet?" I said, because I'm not voting on a piece of paper. I'm voting for the whole person. And this is your philosophy and what you've been brought up with your mother and your father and your brothers, all of that, So I can't be more pleased. And all I want to say is out there, please, Governor, let's try to bring more people in their 50s who have life experience, who have really served their community and served the public. But I'll tell you, for Frank Bellotti, for someone who's been a trial lawyer, as he said, over 70 years, can't get a better endorsement than that. So I'm telling you, it was such a pleasure to meet you, and I hope someday that your children and your wife will come to the diner and I have a chance to meet with them.
Well, I have to show them my Hall of Fame
And I
plan.
do want to say for the public, we have been meeting all through the pandemic, year or whatever, and we haven't had one report of anyone being sick. Thank God, because we've been very careful of who comes in. And like I said, the nominee has been really good watching out for that. So I wish you all good luck. I have to say I support you 100% because this is what I want. And I don't know whether we're getting the message out there. I don't want a 40-year-old that's in a city hall working one of 13 solicitors. We need people with experience and with the heart, because you got to rule with your head and your heart, and you've got it. So thank you, and thank you for all your time. I can't thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, but anyway, just so that Judge Farrell knows, he's on the ballot. He's on the Hall of Fame too, so he's got to know that. I got to tell him.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else have any questions? Yes.
Just very briefly, I think you've done a great job today conducting this hearing. It should be known, especially to nominate great counsel, he knows at least 50%, that's a big number, 50% of the councilors have gotten COVID. I've heard stories that people have been extremely sick, even if they've been vaccinated. Okay, and I know that. So it's a tough decision. I had the decision last week. The nominee, what a wonderful woman. She had 16 people as witnesses. 16 people as guests, I should say. You know what? I gotta take care of the people. When I conduct a hearing, to me, the most important thing is safety. I've known people who have died because of COVID. You can look at this room. This is a small room. You put 30 plus people in this room. You know where those chairs are? That's about 1.5 feet away. 1.5 feet away. I can't do it. I will never. There are people here, you know, they're like 25, most of the members of the council. So I commend you. It's always a tough decision. You want the nominee to bring in his or her family. It's a big deal. I appreciate that. For putting people in this room, nobody, you have no idea if I have COVID right now, right? You have no idea. No one in this room. I have no idea if anyone has COVID in this room. We don't take a PCR test. We don't have that test. You could have 3 or 4 people right now who have COVID. We know the names, but we don't clear the people. We don't ask them for an updated PCR. When people come in here, we know the names of the people, but that's it. That's it. So anyone who comes in here, we have no idea if they're free of COVID. No idea. And I know it's a tough decision because you are a strong supporter of Mr. Walsh. You would have loved to have seen his family in here. I know you would have loved to have seen your family, but I hope you understand Councilor Juneville's decision. Absolutely. And I don't know if you knew this. I'm sure you did. I take that back. They can view it on YouTube. They can see you. So again, that's all I want to say. You're doing an outstanding job.
If I may, Mr.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to concur with what Chris said, Councilor Diana said. When we worked throughout the entire pandemic, we did not stop. There was a short time that we did it on Zoom because of issues that went on. But after that, we were in person and we were in a much bigger space. We came back to this chamber, it became more dangerous, frankly, for people. So I think it's important that we keep the numbers down, and it's unfortunate your family couldn't be here on such an important day, but I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to celebrate it with them.
Thank you very much.
So, on that issue, first of all, our function here is what, in your opinion?
Provide a hearing to the nominee and to give advice and consent on the nominee that's before you.
So the governor nominates, we confirm, we give you the job or deny you the job, right?
Correct.
So this is a job interview for us in public, so the public can see how you respond. So when you went to the JNC, did you bring your children and your family?
I did not.
Why?
It wasn't necessary. And they weren't invited and it wasn't necessary.
So, this isn't, Mr. Rogers' neighborhood or a romper room meeting we're having where we celebrate. It's not a celebration. The celebration can come later when you're sworn in, and you can be sworn in the governor's office with your whole family and children present. This is different. We've had children here where counselors had some serious questions and tough questions for the nominee. And their children were very upset about it sitting there. But that's our job to do that if we feel it necessary. So there's no slight on you or your family. This is a job interview. You come here to be asked questions for one of the most important jobs in state government. Be able to put people in jail cells. Nothing more important than that. So that's why we do it, and it doesn't matter whether you're vaccinated or not. From what I read and hear from scientists, you can still get it. And still get sick and end up in a hospital. So why take the chance? For you, for us, And a lot of the counselors are, some young counselors are here, but most of us are in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So we have to be careful. A couple of things that picked up on, we talked about addictions and about jail and whether it's appropriate for addicted people to go to jail. You know of any other addiction other than drugs where we put somebody in jail in this Commonwealth? No, we don't. We used to put people in jail because they would drink too much. There was a drunk law. I think it was 27210 was the statute. And so if you were drunk, you could get arrested just for being drunk. And if you were addicted to alcohol, you got arrested because you were addicted to alcohol. But I believe it was Governor Dukakis who said, we shouldn't really do that to people with an addiction. We don't say the same about people who are addicted to drugs. And the last study I read, it's over 80% of the people addicted to heroin got it from a doctor giving them the drug for pain or injury. You know something? The AG did a wonderful job filing suit against Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family. But she didn't criticize doctors. And to this day, doctors are still dispensing oxycodone, still dispensing it, knowing the death and destruction that drug has caused people in this Commonwealth and throughout the country. And taxpayers are having to pay for all of that. And the doctors have not stopped, and I say will not stop dispensing that poison and putting it into people's bodies and become addicted. And you can become addicted by taking one pill. Everybody's different with regard to their resistance to addictions. So putting them in jail, you said I might give them third or fourth, another try, 3 or 4 times. I say to you, somebody who hasn't drank in 34 years, it's not about saying I'm going to give somebody, oh, he said 3 times, that's enough. It's never enough. People relapse constantly with addictions, and they need help constantly. So I'd ask you to consider that. Putting somebody in a cage because they got addicted because a doctor gave them the prescription certainly isn't fair, and I think you'd agree with me. You wouldn't want you or your family members put in jail because some doctor gave them that and they became addicted to it. Jail doesn't help. Fear of jail will never trump an addiction. Fear does not trump it. Addictions, whether it's alcohol or drugs, always beat fear. Councilor Iannello raised the issue of closings. I wasn't aware that that was happening. But can you imagine that in a criminal trial where the DA files a motion, hey, I'd like to hear Mr. Jubenville's closing before he gets up so I can respond to it. The government has a whole lot of power, more power than any defendant ever had. They got more money to prosecute people. They got more sources, police sources to go investigate, chemists, politicians, more than any defendant can usually have. The defendants usually can't afford any of that. So to give them another edge to say that, you've got to give up your closing before you do it so that the other side can see what you're going to ask for, I think is going down a slippery slope. It's done in the federal court, where the prosecutor gets up and goes first in the criminal, and the defense lawyer goes second. You say, well, that's pretty good, except the prosecutor can get back up and do it again for the second time in the closing. That's why 95% of the trials in federal court are guilties. That's why. It's all slanted for the government. So the other issue with you is You know, when you don't have a lot of criminal experience and you get on the bench, there's a lot of pressure for you to find people guilty. And you gotta really have some fortitude not to let that happen to you, in my view. You know, call Judge Farrell and ask him if you have an issue. He'll tell you. Nobody can fire you by the way you rule. No one. You don't lose a nickel in your paycheck by the way you rule. So you be your own man. You do what you think is fair and right for the citizens of this Commonwealth. They're paying the freight for all of us here and all the judges sitting in the court system. And remember, we got enough people in jail. When judges put people in jail, there's usually not thinking other than it's easier to put them in jail. So resist that, I would ask you, okay? You got enough people in jail. It hasn't worked. It's never worked. Recidivism is the same. We never stop. Okay? I got a call from Frank Bellotti also, who's obviously a well-respected former member of this council, as a matter of fact. And when he calls or recommends, most of us listen. Okay? You're going to have a great career. Enjoy it. And thank you for coming and testifying.
Thank you all very much for your time and your courtesy. I appreciate it. Good to see you. Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Judge. I don't shake hands.
I'm so happy to see you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another successful.
Perfect.
Shake hands, he does hug a lot.